room 319 of the Hampton Inn, a chilling discovery awaited. One so horrifying it would forever haunt everyone who came across it. Inside the bathroom, blood mixed with water swirled around, a grotesque sign of the violence that had occurred. On the floor lay the small, lifeless body of 11-year-old Joshua Oates, his skull brutally shattered by a heavy metal bar. Over 60 violent injuries marred his fragile frame. What was meant to be a quiet, unassuming hotel room had transformed into a gruesome crime scene, a twisted altar of violence. This shocking discovery would spark a haunting investigation, one that would reveal a story of horror far darker than anyone could have imagined. Joshua Oates was born on April 17, 2008, in Columbus, Ohio. He was a bright and cheerful boy who brought joy to everyone around him. Known for his loving nature, Joshua was adored by his teachers and friends at Liberty Elementary School, where he was in 6th grade. He had a big heart and was always ready to lend a helping hand. From a young age, he embraced Christianity and felt special after being baptized. His grandmother lovingly called him Prince because he was so precious to her. Joshua loved playing baseball and practicing music on his trombone, but what he cherished most was being a big brother to his 2 younger siblings. Tragically, everything changed on St. Patrick's Day in 2020, just a month before his 12th birthday. That day started with excitement as Joshua's mother, Latina Marie Oates, decided to take her 3 sons on a secret trip. She told them they were going to New Orleans for a fun adventure, but didn't share her plans with her partner, Mark. They left home filled with joy, but the reason for their journey was shrouded in mystery. Latina believed she was connected to a famous voodoo queen named Marie Laveau from the 1800s. She thought this trip would help her discover something important about her family history. On March 14th, they checked into a hotel in Laurel, Mississippi. But just 3 days later, everything turned dark. Early on March 17th, Latina left the hotel with only 2 of her sons, Mark and Justin, while Joshua was left behind. When the hotel staff entered their room later that day, they stumbled upon a scene that would haunt them forever. The room had become a nightmare. It was filled with blood and terror. The housekeeper rushed out in shock and called the police. Inside the bathroom lay Joshua's lifeless body, and it was clear that he had suffered immensely. An autopsy revealed that he had over 45 injuries, including deep wounds that pierced his skull. The horror that unfolded in room 319 of the Hampton Inn was unimaginable. After Joshua's tragic death, investigators entered the bathroom and were met with a sight that would haunt them forever. It looked like a dark altar, a place where something terrible had happened. The bathtub was filled with water mixed with blood, and there on the floor lay the lifeless body of Joshua Oates. A heavy metal bar had been driven deep into the back of his skull, a brutal act that left everyone in shock. As the police began to piece together what had happened, they learned that Joshua's mother, Latina Marie Oates, had been taken into custody. At the Jones County Adult Detention Center, she shared a chilling story about that night. She claimed that voices had told her to kill Joshua because he was a demon threatening his younger brothers. This twisted belief led her to slip her son some NyQuil, hoping he would be fast asleep when she attacked him. Marie insisted she didn't want to hurt Joshua more than necessary, but her actions spoke otherwise. Before the attack, she stepped outside to smoke a cigarette and grabbed a backpack from her car. Inside was what she called an ancient dagger, but in reality, it was just the metal bar she used to inflict unimaginable pain. Back in their hotel room, she filled the bathtub with water and bizarrely urinated on a piece of paper before tossing it into the tub. She believed this act would bless the water for her sick ritual. When Joshua was asleep in bed, Marie attacked him with the metal bar, trying to stab him in the chest. But he woke up and fought back against his own mother. In a desperate struggle for his life, Joshua cried out as Marie dragged him into the bathroom. She forced his head under the bloody water until he stopped resisting. Then, in a final act of brutality, she drove the metal bar into his head multiple times. Marie later claimed she was possessed by voodoo spirits that compelled her to commit this horrific crime and insisted that Joshua was possessed too. When questioned about her actions, she interrupted an officer who pointed out that mothers are supposed to protect their children. She claimed she would have sacrificed herself instead if Joshua had truly been hers at that moment. After being arrested, Marie made a phone call to her husband Mark but showed no signs of remorse for what she had done. Instead, she simply asked for clean socks and underwear. During her bond hearing on March 19, 2020, she admitted there had been violence in the hotel bathroom but tried to convince everyone that she wasn't a threat to society or her other sons. The judge and everyone present knew better. Marie's defense team argued that she had mental health issues and requested a mental evaluation. They claimed she had been interested in voodoo for years and had struggled with mental illness even longer. However, those close to her believed this was not true and speculated that her mother, who worked in mental health, might have coached her on how to present herself during evaluations. The journey through the legal system for Latina Marie Oates was long and complicated, filled with twists and turns that seemed almost unreal. After a series of mental evaluations, the pandemic, and the retirement of key legal figures involved in her case, it took a while to bring her to justice. Initially charged with first-degree murder, her charge was later upgraded to capital murder by a grand jury. This change meant that her attorney, Janine Pacific, had to step down because she wasn't qualified to defend a capital murder case. Latina was then assigned new state attorneys, Lynn Derrick Taylor and Cruz Gray. Determined not to waste any more time, the judge insisted on keeping the already set court date. The defense strategy focused on proving that Latina was criminally insane at the time of Joshua's death. They argued that she genuinely believed she was killing a demon rather than her own son. This concept of insanity is recognized by the legal system for a reason. It acknowledges that sometimes our minds can become so troubled that we lose touch with reality and can't control our actions. As the trial progressed, the evidence presented painted a picture of a woman deeply affected by severe mental illness, specifically schizophrenia. Forensic psychologists Dr. Chris Lott and Robert Storer testified that they had assessed Latina's mental state and concluded she had been acting under delusions when she killed Joshua. They explained how she had convinced them of her mental health issues over months of evaluation. Latina claimed that she started hearing voices in her head in January 2020. She believed these voices included her deceased grandmother urging her to reunite with her family. During this time, she took several unplanned trips and even thought someone had put a hex on her. Eventually, she claimed to hear the voice of Jesus telling her to return to her roots in Laurel, Mississippi. When she picked up Joshua from his friend's house, she said this voice warned her that people there were witches turning her son into a demon. In a bizarre twist of delusion, Latina believed she was Cleopatra or Mary Magdalene at times, even thinking she was the voodoo queen Marie Laveau herself. The prosecutor, Katie Samra, dismantled the defense's arguments during the trial. She pointed out that cases involving children are always personal and highlighted how Latina's story became increasingly detailed and strange over time. Latina's claims included bizarre elements like an upside-down rosary, a detail reminiscent of horror movies, and other oddities that made her story seem even more unbelievable. The prosecutor emphasized that these tales were not just signs of mental illness, but also an attempt to avoid accountability for an unspeakable act. Ultimately, after much deliberation, the jury found Latina Marie Oates guilty of capital murder for the brutal killing of her son Joshua. They rejected claims of insanity and decided that despite her mental health struggles, she was responsible for her actions. The courtroom was filled with tension as the truth about Latina Marie Oates began to unravel. Questions lingered in the air about her mental state and the voices she claimed to hear. If she truly had command hallucinations that forced her actions, why could she sometimes choose to ignore them? After her arrest, she wrote letters acknowledging that the voices weren't real and expressed her desire to stop listening to them. This raised a chilling question. Why did she only claim she couldn't disobey the voices when it came to killing her own child? During an interview, Justin, one of Joshua's younger brothers, described how discipline was handled in their family. He recalled that when their mother disciplined them, she would often say, "I hate this family." It made some wonder if Latina wanted out of her responsibilities as a mother and found a way to escape. She left home without packing any bags for her children and hadn't paid rent for 2 months. It seemed as though she had no intention of returning with them. Latina's behavior suggested she could choose when to obey the voices. For instance, she made a decision not to obey them when it came to burying something in the forest to deactivate bad energy. But when it came to inflicting over 60 wounds on her 11-year-old son, Joshua, who cried out for her, it appeared she had lost all control. During the trial, prosecutor Katie Samra painted a picture of Latina as an intelligent woman who had run her own cleaning business and even written a manual for a relative's daycare. Despite this capability, when she got back together with Mark, he had to quit his job to manage her cleaning company while she lounged on the couch watching Netflix. This shift in their roles raised questions about her motivations. Samra argued that Latina's actions were premeditated. Why else would she have brought a metal bar from Ohio to Laurel? The day before Joshua's murder, she bought NyQuil at a dollar store, an over-the-counter medication she claimed was for him. However, toxicology reports showed no trace of sleep medication in Joshua's system. Instead, it turned out that Latina had given the NyQuil to Mark and Justin, hoping they would sleep through the horrific events unfolding in the bathroom. The two little boys witnessed their mother drag Joshua away and heard everything. They would carry those awful memories with them forever. When Latina learned about the Amber Alert issued from Mark and Justin, she quickly turned off her cell phone, a sign of guilt and panic. A statement made by Latina during her arrest caught everyone's attention. She told the police that she understood why they were there and insisted that she didn't mean it. This moment shifted everything. It implied some awareness of her actions. However, there was no misunderstanding. She was guilty of a heinous crime. Concerns arose among staff at Pine Belt Mental Health Care Resources about Latina's mother interfering with her treatment. As a mental health worker herself, there were fears that she might be coaching Latina for her defense. Psychologists Chris Lott and Robert Storer, who had conducted thousands of mental assessments throughout their careers, eventually acknowledged that their earlier findings regarding Latina's mental state were incorrect. On September 29, 2023, after much deliberation and evaluation, Latina Marie Oates was deemed fit to stand trial. The courtroom awaited what would come next in this tragic case. Despite the overwhelming evidence against Latina Marie Oates, her defense team argued that she should serve her time in a mental health facility rather than in prison. They believed that while it was difficult to suppress feelings of anger towards someone who had killed a child, it was essential for the jury to remain rational during their deliberations. The emotional weight of the case was heavy for everyone involved, especially for Mark Oates, Joshua's father. He had a little boy too, and he shared his thoughts about Latina and her relationship with their children. The jury faced a tough question. Could Latina truly distinguish between right and wrong at the time of the crime? They had to consider all the evidence, including 3 years of evaluations and countless discussions about her mental state. Did they believe she genuinely thought she was killing a demon? Or did they think she wanted to murder her son? If there was any reasonable doubt in their minds about her sanity, they were instructed to find her not guilty. However, Judge Williamson remained firm in his decision. He sentenced Latina Marie Oates to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the charge of capital murder. The death penalty had been a potential outcome, but prosecutors chose not to pursue it. They couldn't bear the thought of forcing Mark Jr. and Justin to testify against their mother. Those little boys had already endured enough trauma. During the trial, Mark Oates testified about the months leading up to Joshua's murder. He explained that in January, Latina had become extremely religious. While she had always believed in God, her faith intensified dramatically. At first, things seemed fine when they got back together, but then things took a dark turn. One day, while Mark was at the store, Latina accused him of plotting to take their children away from her. This accusation shocked him and made him realize how much she was struggling. On February 17, 2020, Mark called for emergency medical help because Latina was acting erratically and causing chaos at home. Unsure how to calm her down, he reached out to her mother for advice. She suggested he tell the EMTs that Latina posed a threat to herself and others so they could take her for help. Unfortunately, when the medics arrived, Mark didn't mention this part, something he would later regret. Others close to Latina shared their thoughts on her mental health as well. Dorena Oates, Mark's mother and Latina's ex-mother-in-law, knew Marie long before Mark became involved with her. She couldn't recall any conversations where Marie discussed her mental health or any interest in voodoo practices. Dorina did mention that Marie had been abused as a child by her own mother and suspected that Latina's actions were aimed at hurting both her and Mark. Dorina believed that Marie might have harmed Joshua as a way to get back at them, and even suggested that she could have killed her other two sons if given the chance. While these words came from a devastated grandmother grappling with unimaginable loss, they reflected the fear and confusion surrounding Marie's actions. Another voice in this tragic story came from one of Latina's ex-girlfriends. She described Marie as intelligent but also manipulative and deceitful. Marie had studied psychology and business management and even designed websites. Their relationship was tumultuous. The ex-girlfriend recounted instances where she felt threatened by Marie's behavior during arguments, including times when police were called due to escalating conflicts. As the trial continued, it became clear that Latina Marie Oates was not just a troubled mother. She was a complex individual whose life had been marked by both intelligence and deep-seated issues. The courtroom buzzed with emotions as everyone tried to make sense of how such a tragedy could occur. A young boy lost forever due to his mother's actions, leaving behind questions that would linger long after the trial ended. The aftermath of the tragic case involving Latina Marie Oates and her son Joshua is heartbreaking, leaving many questions unanswered. Debbie Moss, Mark Oates' sister, described Marie as a loving mother who never showed signs of the darkness that would later unfold. She noted that just a month before Joshua's death, Mark and Marie had reconciled. However, after a trip to Chicago in early 2020, Debbie sensed that something had changed in Marie. She was different, but she couldn't pinpoint exactly how. The horror of that night at the Hampton Inn will haunt Joshua's surviving brothers, Mark Jr. and Justin, forever. While they were physically unharmed, the trauma they experienced is unimaginable. Reports indicate that both boys have undergone counseling to help them cope with their experiences, but no amount of therapy can bring back their brother or their mother as they once knew her. They have lost so much, and it's hoped that they can find a way to build a stable life despite the shadows of their past. Mark Jr. and Justin, if you're listening, remember, your past does not define you. You have choices ahead of you, and your story can inspire others who face similar tragedies. You can be heroes for kids who need hope and guidance. Reflecting on the situation, it's evident that this tragedy might have been prevented if different actions had been taken earlier. Mark's mother expressed concerns about his inability to stand up to Latina or speak negatively about her. It seemed he might have been a victim of emotional abuse himself, which complicated his ability to act against her during troubling times. For me, the blame rests solely on Latina Marie Oates. She made the choice to murder her son, no matter what delusions she claimed to have experienced involving voodoo or religious beliefs. It's clear that she created a monster within herself, and now she must face the consequences of her actions. I hope that the haunting memories of Joshua's last moments will stay with her forever.